Welcome to the May 2nd edition of Impact. My name is Russell Thomas, and I'm so pleased to be joined today by Ross Penner, who's the Director of Canadian Operations for Mennonite Disaster Service. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Let's be just honest. We're actually recording this. It's way back in April, but this show will run on May 2nd because it was really important for me to find a topic that would be really suitable to the day. We are one day away from the anniversary of the fire, and so thank you for coming in. And of course, you and your team have been resident at the Red Pole Center for quite some time under sort of the Ensure umbrella.
Yeah.
I've always wondered what Ensure stands for. Not to put you on the spot, but can you say what the acronym means?
Yeah, so NGOs, so non-government organizations, supporting uninsured and underinsured recovery.
So a big piece of this disaster that became clear in the days after the fire was that there was a bunch of people in a bucket which was uninsured or underinsured. And none of us really knew who was going to help them.
Yeah.
The Red Cross, the United Way, government. So how soon did your team realize, okay, we have a role to play with those folks?
So Mennonite Disaster Service has been responding to disasters throughout Canada and the U.S. for over 50 years, and a disaster of this size, the amount of loss, the number of homes that were gone, we just know ahead of time in that kind of situation there are going to be people that are going to fall through the cracks who won't have the means to recover. So, so we immediately, when we hear about something like this, we go in with the assumption, which is almost always proved true, that there are some who don't have means to recover, and so that's where we come in.
So let's go back to that time, May 3rd last year. You're presumably in Winnipeg, that's where you live.
Yeah.
You begin to see the news reports of what's happening in Fort McMurray. How quickly do you and your colleagues mobilize mentally? How quickly did you mobilize physically?
Yeah, so mentally we're always, we're a network of volunteers throughout Canada, and so our volunteers everywhere are looking for and keeping their ears to the ground on disasters as small as a neighbor whose house burnt or whose basement flooded, and as big as a Fort McMurray fire. So when we hear that, we're immediately starting to talk to each other, we're monitoring, we're looking to see what happens and how we can respond. Now in the Fort McMurray fire, that one was a case where the whole city had to evacuate, and so in terms of, we don't focus on the early emergency response. That's usually done in Canada by government, by trained professionals. Ours is more the long term. So as the city was evacuated, of course, that didn't provide an opportunity for us to come here either. So very shortly after the city was reopened and people were starting to re-enter, we had a team up here to come and take a look and do an initial assessment on what our role might be down the way.
Ross, do you have any sense of what was the scale of the number of people who were uninsured or not insured at all? How many are there? So
in the re-entry registration process, everybody was able to register with Red Cross. And as they were registering, there's the information that they put down is optional. But we do know that those who indicated that they did not have insurance and had lost their home on that re-entry survey was somewhere over 300 households that didn't have insurance to rebuild, to recover. So
that's 300 families, essentially.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
So that was our early indicator, and that's the only hard numbers that we know at this point.
I'm sure you've asked the question, and everybody wonders, well, why didn't people have insurance?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and there can be such a range of responses to that and reasons for that. Anywhere from someone who missed a payment to somebody who may have made the decision, maybe an unwise decision, not to insure their place. There are so many reasons. When we work in instances like this, often there's a lot of, what should I say? People aren't happy about that decision, of course, and feel a lot of shame. And our experience is this isn't a time to be pushing that question as much as how can we walk with you in recovery.
Yeah, so at some point in the process, you know, we talk a lot about the collaboration that we've seen in the post-fire environment from a United Way perspective. But in your case, all of a sudden, you're not doing this alone. You're working with Habitat for Humanity, Fuse Socials. One of our partners is involved with you. And let me see how smart I am. I'm missing a few. Help me out.
World Renew.
Okay.
And Samaritan's Purse.
Samaritan's Purse. I love those guys. They came to my house and helped us move it in a new dryer. But that's another story.
Good.
So how did you coalesce as a group? How did that happen?
So in disaster response, there are several different agencies. There's many more in the U.S. There's a few of us in Canada, and so when disasters happen on a large scale, we are already familiar with us. In fact, with each other. Several of us have memorandums of understanding of how we will work together and how we will always put those who are recovering from disaster first in our response, and that there is, in an instance like Fort McMurray, there's way more than any of us could do, and we work best when we work together. So as we came to Fort McMurray, we immediately formed a group, the agencies that are involved. We're very glad for, especially for like Habitat for Humanity, who is rooted in the community. They've been in this community, so they provided a good ground base for us, and Fuse Social also in the community. And then others of us coming and joining together and saying, hey, let's work together. Let's figure out how we can work cooperatively to get people back in their homes as soon as possible.
How did the Fort McMurray fire disaster compare to other larger disasters that you've personally been involved with?
We were talking about this the other day. You know, one of the most unique pieces of the Fort McMurray disaster was the evacuation piece. It's really rare to have a whole city evacuate and have to evacuate, and for that to end up being a month. I think it was just a little over a month.
It was, yeah.
That's massive. That's massive, especially in terms of the resources, the people resources, the energy that it takes not only to get the people out safely, then to ensure the security of the city during that time, and then to figure out how to have people re-enter, So by the time we came on the scene, there was already so much energy that had been expended by the city, by the community residents, that we noticed how heavy and a workload that was even before we get to some of the other work of recovery. That's one of the unique ones. Of course, the size is also really significant. This, I believe, is the largest evacuation that happened in Canadian.
It's actually the second largest. There was one in Mississauga.
Oh, okay.
That happened, I think, in the 70s. That was slightly larger.
Yeah.
But in terms of cost, it was number one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I'm interested as well, as an outsider looking in during that May's 3rd, 4th, 5th period, how did you respond to the fact that many people got out on the first day, particularly, without a single loss of life?
For me, that to me is completely the miracle and the absolutely amazing part of that. Similar disasters in the U.S., fires like this or fires coming into a city like this, it's typical, unfortunately, to have between 100 and 200 deaths in a case like that. And that there was 0 in Fort McMurray, something was done right, and we're just amazed at the miracle of that, and thankful for that.
My guest this morning is Ross Penner from Mennonite Disaster Service. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to find out how the Ensure group, including Mennonite Disaster Service, is helping the uninsured and the underinsured. What the program looks like, and the progress that's been made. You're listening to Impact on the May 2nd edition. This is being pre-recorded, so we're way back in April and saying hello to you on this very important day in Fort McMurray history as we get ready for the 1-year anniversary of the evacuation and fire that displaced so many of us. We'll come back with more right after this. And welcome back to Impact. My guest this morning is Ross Penner from Mennonite Disaster Services. It's May 2nd as you're listening to this, though we're recording the program a couple of weeks earlier. And I know that your focus and the focus of the Ensure team is this bucket of people and families that really had nothing to fall back on, that had loss. Mm-hmm. Are you only dealing with people that suffered total loss, or are you also helping people that maybe suffered partial loss?
Absolutely, and the partial loss too. So those who have repairs or have some needs and don't have the means to do that, we're accepting applications for that as well. And we've already signed on some jobs where we're helping out people who have repairs, siding, or other
Sure.
issues that some people had flooding as a result of this. Yeah, we're doing both.
I'm going to create a fictitious scenario. I'm a person that lost my home. I know of one fellow, I won't say his name, but he lost his home and was 1 day away from having his insurance in place, but he didn't have it in place. So let's pretend that I'm that person. Mm-hmm. And I come to your team and I apply. Mm-hmm. Talk about what does the program look like? How do you help while still having a sense of ownership of the family that had the circumstance that they had no insurance?
So there's, we could maybe identify a two-stage process. One is, as an Ensure group, there are some baselines that we're looking for, that all of our organizations are looking for. So making sure you didn't have insurance. Is this, we want to help people for whom this was their primary residence, or their only residence. So if they have another house somewhere else, chances are we'll be looking to people who have a greater need than those who might have a second
Sure.
home or place. And then looking at financial resources, baseline financial resources. Do you have the means, even though you may have lost your home now, to rebuild, to finance for another mortgage? And what are those means? So that's kind of a baseline to make sure that all of the organizations are looking for. Now, in the case of Mennonite Disaster Service, what we provide is labor. We have a network of volunteers throughout Canada and the U.S., skilled and unskilled, and so we bring to the table the labor to build a house. And what we are looking for from the clients is the ability to cover materials and the cost of materials. Now, sometimes that's not even present. So we do work and try to write for grants that would cover the material parts, look for donors that would do that part as well. So if you come in, we would Ensure has an intake sort of application in which we get some baseline information on your financial condition, on your to verify you don't have insurance. And then after that initial application is done, that will come to the Ensure table, where the organizations will talk together and go, as we look at this one, this feels like that's a good fit for the way that Habitat does it. Habitat, you want to take this? Or it feels like this is a good case for Mennonite Disaster Service and World Renew. We're actually working,
Sure.
We'll work in partnership with World Renew on this particular one because we're so similar. or it feels like this is a good one for Samaritan's Purse. And so at that table, it gets put out to the appropriate organizations, as we know each other as well, and then they will top up whatever information they need for their application process.
So a family qualifies,
Yeah.
and let's say they're in your bucket
Yeah.
with your partners at World Renew.
Yeah.
Just some logistical things. You have a team on the ground here in Fort McMurray. You have volunteers, you
Yeah.
say, that are going to come in and help build homes.
Yep.
Where do they stay?
So it is the housing. The
Wood Buffalo Housing?
housing has donated to us four apartments
Okay.
for us to stay in. So we're staying up on Millennial Gate in those apartments. We've set up our shop there. And right now we have our leadership volunteers coming in. So this week we have a couple of people who are doing assessment and case management. They're looking at the files coming in. And it was 2 days ago that we met with some more clients, and one of them we said, yeah, we can help you. So we signed a job card. That means we have a contract to build a house for her. And so the way Mennonite Disaster Service works is we actually have 3 plans, house plans, a basic bungalow that we are very familiar with, that our volunteers have built over and over again, and we offer that to the client, and we say, and here are your choices for some of the basics, like your shingles, your siding, and your flooring, and lighting, and those kinds of things. So they start to make those decisions, and we plan to schedule that in and schedule our volunteers in. So,
How are these folks doing that you've met? Not without being specific.
Yeah. They're struggling. I was mentioning to you on the ride here, one of the things that we've learned in disaster recovery is that it's exactly a year later when people are usually at their lowest point in the recovery process, particularly those who don't have the means to recover. When we had a social worker do some research for us, and we were surprised to learn that it was so much later that they're at their lowest point. A year later, imagine a year later, you've gone through that initial, wow, all these people came and helped us, wow, the community was great, wow, I didn't know that all these people would care for us. Most people are mostly gone now. And you've started the process, how am I going to recover? And a year later, you still don't know if you're going to have a home. You still don't know what you're going to do about the mortgage you have without a house. That's a struggle. And the trauma of going through that can be huge. And the number of decisions that you've had to make in this last year, it has the effect of wearing a person down. So as we come alongside these people, it's typical to get a response of, I can't believe that, well, we signed one job card, we call it, a couple of weeks ago, and the woman said afterwards, I can't believe there are people like you in the world. And that was just so powerful to hear from this woman who didn't know if she'd ever have a home again. And at the same time, when you ask them, it's typical. The other day, we had someone whom we had signed, and we'd asked them to make some decisions about their roofing color and their siding, and they just couldn't. And we've experienced that that's actually normal. That it's hard to make simple decisions like that when you've been through the trauma of a disaster, and but it's also an honor to walk alongside people to show the love that we are compelled, God's love for them in walking beside them as they make these decisions, as they recover. We have had to learn. So we're a volunteer organization, and we often welcome if the clients themselves want to help in the build. They're welcome to do that, we've found that so often they are so exhausted from this whole process that they don't have anything left. Sometimes they do. And we've learned not to judge and just to come and love and say, if you need to sit and relax, you do that. Because you've been through kind of a hell on earth journey.
Yeah.
And we're here to bring hope. So.
That's a powerful, powerful story. My guest is Ross Penner with Mennonite Disaster Service. We're talking about the people in the Fort McMurray fire disaster, the families that maybe had no insurance or were highly underinsured, and they kind of fell into a bucket that nobody had the capacity to deal with, quite frankly. And so Mennonite Disaster Service with their partners at, let's see, World Renew, all right, Samaritan's Purse, Habitat for Humanity, Fuse Social, have collectively called themselves Ensure to help that bucket of people. And we're going to take another break and come back and talk about how long does this go on in terms of the work that you're going to do. You're listening to Impact. It's May 2nd, and Impact is a collaborative project of the United Way of Fort McMurray, Fuse Social, Shaw TV, Fort McMurray, who always make us look so good, and our friends right here at 91.1 The Bridge, who make us sound great. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the show. It's an honor to have Ross Penner from Winnipeg, Manitoba in the studio with us today. Ross has maybe is an honorary Fort McMurray citizen now. I'm not sure exactly how much time you've spent on the ground. He's with Mennonite Disaster Service. You and your team, I see Harold quite a bit, and his team, because they work out of the Red Pole Center. But have you spent a lot of time in Fort McMurray over the last year?
This is my fourth visit up here. I mentioned that we're really a network of volunteers, and the fact that most of our key leadership in terms of the project planning and logistics is volunteers. So Harold's an example of that. He's our project coordinator for the Fort McMurray recovery. Glenn Kaufman is up here often. He's the Alberta unit chair, and he's doing a lot of our casework and also logistics, and so he's here often.
They're volunteers.
They're volunteers, and they put in, actually, all of those people have put in more hours specifically for Fort McMurray than I have myself. I work much more at the higher level in terms of making arrangements and going after funding and those kinds of things. So.
How do they do it? Like, honestly, like, how do they, the group from Samaritan's Purse, they were from all over Alberta, and they were on their weekends, they come up and help, but how do these people do it?
These are people who have had volunteer experience with MDS or other organizations, and who go, I am sold on doing this. By the grace of God, they have time to offer and to be able to do this. So Harold, for example, has his own construction business, but this is such a high priority that he gives significant time for this because he's compelled by the opportunity to live out what it means to be a neighbor, to help those who are down and out. And our volunteers, when they get the experience of meeting a homeowner or a new homeowner, or one of our clients, and see the difference that they're making in somebody's life, and live out what it means to express the love of God as a neighbor, they're absolutely sold on it. So a large portion of our volunteers are those who are retired, or those who are able to give time, especially in the winter months, to volunteering. I sometimes describe our volunteers as people who would go squirrely if they had nothing to do on a vacation, so they'd rather work a 40-hour week and make a difference in somebody's life. They are truly amazing people. Sometimes when I get all muddled in the administrative part of my job, the thing that recharges me the most is to go on a project and see our volunteers, and I go, I'm amazed at these people.
Yeah, they always serve with a smile.
Yeah.
It's May 2nd. Tomorrow is the anniversary. And I don't mean to put you in an awkward position, but do you have any sense of what we should expect tomorrow?
Well, so what we know and have observed is that there's anniversary dates. They can be dates that raise all kinds of emotions, especially of an event that had such a destructive impact on a community in terms of the physical structures and what got burnt. On the other hand, it's also the anniversary of Fort McMurray and really Canada. Well, and we had response from the U.S. too in terms of giving to this recovery. It's the anniversary of something great that rises up in people as we care for one another. So as I think of the anniversary date, I encourage, especially the residents in Fort McMurray, to be aware of both. To be aware that there are people that, I'm so glad to be a part of this community, and look how far we've come in the recovery. That's great. And then to be aware that there are some people who are at their lowest point, and they may have already kind of picked up that they're not supposed to talk about that anymore. That when they talk about the pain and the struggle that they're in now, others are just exhausted to hear about that. And so maybe there will be those who are quieter. And so keeping our eyes open on a date like that, on an anniversary like that, and just being aware that different people will have different experiences, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind at this date.
That's a great piece of advice. How long do you think that you and your team are going to be in Fort McMurray?
So our initial plan is to be here. Well, the building season is pretty tough through the winter, and the costs add up. So right now our initial plan is to be here for all of this summer and then all of next summer through the building season. So those initial 2 years. From our experience in disaster recovery, that tends to be the longest time frame we initially want to plan for, and in something this big, we know that we anticipate there will be easily enough work for those 2 summers, those 2 building seasons. Beyond that, we're unsure. So that's our initial plan right now.
If somebody's listening to the broadcast right now that is in that pile of uninsured or underinsured, that they lost their primary residence, is it too late to apply and ask for help?
Absolutely not. In fact, I went to get a haircut yesterday, and I talked to, I told the woman who cut my hair what I did, and she said, "Oh, I have a friend who's in that situation. They didn't know about that." And so we know there are lots who are still unaware. So I think probably one of the easiest ways is to call the Pulse line here in town.
Oh, now you're testing me. It's 743-7000, I think.
Yeah, so the RM of Wood Buffalo has that line. Call the Pulse line and say, "I lost my home, I don't have insurance, I understand there's a group that would work with that," and they'll get you hooked up with the right people.
Well, Ross, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah.
It's been great to hear about what you're doing and how you're doing it. The volunteers that are putting in so many hours, really from the bottom of their hearts. And I think the other thing that's really striking to me is the role of authentic collaboration in rebuilding a community.
Yeah.
And the work that you guys are doing is just amazing. So
thanks so much for the chance to get the message out.
Yeah, you bet.
And we'll be praying for this community as we come up to the anniversary.
My guest this morning has been Ross Penner from Mennonite Disaster Service. He is the Director of Canadian Operations based in Winnipeg, but spending quite a bit of his time here in Fort McMurray. You've been listening to the May 2nd edition of Impact. It is a collaboration of the United Way, Fuse Social, Shaw TV, Fort McMurray, and our friends here at 91.1 The Bridge.